As Stan said, we got to know each other in '87. I actually joined the State Department in '85, so it was very early on that we became friends. And throughout my career, I have concentrated mostly on Asia, and it was really mid '90s. That was my first assignment to South Korea at the U.S. Embassy there. And so from about then on until last year, I've been kind of on and off monitoring Korean situation, especially North Korean situation. So when I was in Malaysia, my assignment was coming to an end in 2016, and I got a call from Washington saying, how about for your next assignment, come back and be the special representative for North Korea policy. At that time, this was summer of 2016. I fully expected Hillary Clinton to win. How silly we were. And I had worked for Hillary when she was Secretary of State. I knew her quite well, traveled with her, and I said, that'll be great. There'll be very familiar people. And elections have this way of surprising you. And come November 2016, we have Donald Trump as president. And I fully expected, because I had my job was what we call a level that usually political appointees get in, that I thought I'll be out of job. But lo and behold, for whatever reason, maybe they didn't know I was there, they decided to stick with me. And so I ended up working for I want to say about almost a year and a half with the Trump administration, specifically on North Korean policy. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my experience, what is going on right now, and what we can expect in coming months. The question about North Korea has always been about how much denuclearization should North Korea give us for how much normalization in relationship. Normalization in terms of diplomatic recognition, normalization in terms of lifting sanctions, lifting all the impediments to their economic growth, normalization in terms of recognizing the regime. So it's always been about that. And so, very simply put, is how much denuclearization for how much normalization. And like all diplomatic negotiations, of course, it is about political will of the administration, political will in Washington, political will in Pyongyang, and those are the two principal players. But I would of course say that political will in Beijing, political will in South Korea also matter a great deal. So I wanted to talk about initially about political will in Washington, and then political will in North Korea, and how they match up, and to see whether any kind of normalcy is possible given Donald Trump on the one hand, Kim Jong-un on the other hand. So, less than about 4 months ago, I think many of you will have seen Donald Trump enter the DMZ into what is North Korean territory. He stepped into it. And this is something of a historic moment, really, if you think about it. Nobody had done it before. No sitting president had done it before. And more than that, who would have thought this is the third meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump? The first one was in Singapore in February 2018. The second one was So June 2018. The second one was in Hanoi, February 2019, and third one now 4 months ago in DMZ. I mean, if you think about it, especially when I was in the government, we were in the middle of what we call fire and fury, Who would have thought that this kind of meeting would be possible? I remember getting up one morning and getting a call from State Department, and somebody just said, President Trump just made a remark about North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and let me just get the quote right, I think he said, the rocket man is on a suicide mission, And then, following few days, he said, North Korea tweeted, North Korea must not make any more threats to the US or they will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. And then, of course, Kim Jong-un is not going to back down. He said, the entire US, quote, is within our range of nuclear weapons and a nuclear button is always on my desk. And then I think President Trump gets a gold medal for this response, quote, my nuclear button is bigger and more powerful than I mean, I guess, by now it shouldn't be surprising, but it was shocking. And certainly, by around September or so, I was concerned. It wasn't so much that one day Trump or Kim would get up and push the button. No. It's that the tensions were rising, military were on different level of alert. And when that happens, accidents happen, miscalculations are made, And I don't know whether you remember the incident over Hawaii, when I think they suddenly said missiles are coming, everyone seeks shelter. Of course, very quickly, I called our guys doing military guys. They quickly said it was a false alarm. But supposing that had happened in North Korea, where there is no secondary detection, and there is only the warning that military is coming because they cannot quickly reassess. I think it could have really started something, and so that was I was mostly worried about. Then, of course, about just a few months after I left, we get into a situation, completely different situation, where you had the first summit largely mediated by the South Korean president. And then the whole tone changes, And after the first summit, Trump comes out and says, about Kim Jong-un, we have fantastic chemistry. He's very smart, great personality, worthy negotiator. And then you had a whole series of exchanging letters, and to the extent he finally said, we're in love, go figure, So really, it's difficult for us to assess, but the way President Trump talks about Kim Jong-un is that this is a foreign policy success for him, that this is a major accomplishment in the sense that he has reached a point in which there is no provocation, no testing of missiles, no nuclear tests. So he sees this as a big game, And so let's quickly assess what has been accomplished so far. It is true, I do believe that tensions are down. That's a big deal. You're not going to get the military miscalculation that we would have gotten. Second, it is true there are no nuclear tests. The last nuclear test North Korea conducted was in 2017 in September, and that was their 6th nuclear test, and their yield was of 150 kilotons. 150 kilotons is equivalent to about 20 bombs that went off in Nagasaki. So it's a huge yield. And a lot of people think now maybe they don't need to test anymore. They have succeeded already. Now they probably need more delivery system, that's ICBM testing to truly tell. But by now, most analysts assume that they can reach parts of the United States, continental United States. I mean, it may be a little disturbing for you, but the towns often mention that they might hit, smallish but not huge towns like LA or San Francisco, but they tend to be like Denver or Eugene, Oregon, and those places. But anyways, so really, I think tensions are down, and so they have a suspended testing. In return, US gave up something big, which is joint military exercises that are conducted between South Korea and US. I mean, military readiness is important, but that is a significant give. But the biggest problem is that their underlying problem, fundamental problem, which is their possession of nuclear weapons, things haven't changed that much. Things haven't changed that much because they're still producing nuclear weapons, and every year we believe that they are adding at least 4 or 5 nuclear weapons to their arsenal. So that's a big problem, that they're still producing nuclear weapons. But even then, it's probably a sustainable situation for Donald Trump. I think he would, of course, like a deal, like a more of an agreement than what we have so far, which is simply suspension of these 2 items. But I think so far it is a sustainable situation. And within the administration, I think more than anyone else, Trump is much more forward-leaning to make a deal with North Korea. I mean, I think you will all have noticed that probably the biggest detractors to such a deal, John Bolton, was fired, about a month ago. And for Bolton, who is really an ideologue, he really doesn't believe there is North Korea will give up nuclear weapons. So in order for them to give up nuclear weapons, you must make them give it up through military means if necessary. So that's his fundamental belief. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but I'm not sure that's a good way either, Outside the administration, US Congress is always a factor. And typically, it has been the Republican administration that have opposed dealing with North Korea. They have had much stronger position. But now with Trump, controlling the Republican Party, there is really no opposition, not much of an opposition up on the Hill. And the many who would oppose Trump, such as Democrats, anti-war activists, generally they are pro-engagement. So they are not really going to oppose anyone wanting to reach out to North Korea and wanting to see a diplomatic resolution. But I also believe that US public, and this is important, leading up to presidential election next year, generally favor kind of working it out with North Korea. In fact, in 2017, middle of 2017, about 21% of American population viewed North Korea as the greatest enemy and greatest threat to the United States. These days, I think the figure is, in low teens. Those people who consider North Korea as to be the biggest threat. That is not to say American public view North Korea favorably, but they no longer view it as a big threat there was. So I do think all the kind of players in American foreign policy, the administration, the president himself, lack of kind of pushback from Congress, the public opinion, all tend to favor, let's try to see what we can do, rather than, going in there with military to disarm them. So then, how about the thinking in North Korea? I think Kim Jong-un would be very happy with himself. Over the last year and a half, he's met Trump 3 times. He's met Xi Jinping in China 5 times. He's met the South Korean president 3 times. He's met the Russian president Vladimir Putin once. And there is Japanese prime minister begging to see him, So, we used to think of Kim Jong-un as a kind of a, chubby young man with funny haircut, And we think now it's normal to see him on world stage with world leaders, getting the recognition, getting the legitimacy that comes with it. So in that sense, I think he has come out a major figure in international stage. Also, in terms of substance, North Korea has given up very little. They've stopped testing, that's about it. But in return, as the sanctions have eroded to some extent, they've gotten the world recognition. And from a negotiated point of view, when I was doing this work, I always assumed that we call it freeze for freeze. If they froze missile tests, all missile tests, not just long-range missile tests, but short-range missile tests as well, and nuclear testing, then our side would freeze military actions. But they only froze suspended long-range missile tests. So he's gotten a fairly decent deal, So even, but okay, they've won this round, but their fundamental problem also remains the same. And because there has been no real change in North Korean isolation from the international stage. Diplomatic sanctions remain in place, economic sanctions remain in place, they remain essentially a pariah state, and as a result, there is no significant improvement in lives of North Korean people. They are still living in poverty. North Korea is probably the poorest nation in Asia. Just across DMZ, South Korean per capita income is about $31,000 a year. North Korean per capita income is barely $1,000. So in terms of income, South Koreans are 30 times better off than North Koreans. And North Korea is probably now about the only country in Asia where there is widespread hunger and malnutrition. And when my family left Korea in 1964, North Korea was wealthier of the 2 Koreas. And it really wasn't until the mid-70s that South Korea took over North Korea in terms of economic development. So in spite of all these summit meetings, North Korea has not taken a serious step in their ultimate goal, which is obtaining security, obtaining economic security, obtaining diplomatic security, obtaining probably most important regime security. And so I do think that North Korea has no choice but also to continue negotiations. Yes, we can say Kim Jong-un had a short-term win, but still he has to press on to get this kind of security he wants. And we saw these two positions really playing out actually over the last weekend, where there was a working level meeting between the North Koreans and the United States. And this was a meeting that Trump and Kim Jong-un agreed when they met in DMZ in June. And American side was led by my successor, Steve Biegun, who's, by the way, very nice guy. And North Korean side was led by another Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kim Myung-gil. The previous guy had been fired with the chief negotiator after the failure in Hanoi. But good news is that he's still alive. So I wanted to discuss a little bit on what a deal might look like. And here, we're going back to our original thought, which is how much denuclearization for how much normal treatment, And because of the North Korean short-term gain, I really felt that North Koreans made a couple of mistakes in coming to Stockholm for the working level meeting. First of all, they tested a medium-range missile, and we call that submarine-launched ballistic missile. And that's fairly new to them. If you want to be really strong in terms of nuclear weapons, you want what's called a triad. So you want the land-based missile launch, they have that. You want the submarine launch, because you can go anywhere, very hard to detect. And then third leg of the triad is the airborne, delivery. And so North Korea is now very much trying to get the second leg. And they made a mistake because they're very confident. Second mistake I believe they made was that they really thought that the US Trump, by firing Bolton, had sent a signal that US side will fundamentally change our position to be more immediate. In fact, I think North Korea thought Trump had fired Bolton because of North Korea. And I think that's a real mistake. Trump was fired for many reasons, including the fact that Trump couldn't stand him. I mean, Bolton was fired for many reasons. And, he didn't like him over North Korea. He also didn't like him over the Taliban negotiations. He also didn't like him over Iran negotiations. Just didn't like him, and so because they thought that, they became quite demanding. And I think it backfired again. And so the whole thing ended up in complete shambles. And you see statements from the North Korean side that essentially nothing had changed on the US side. And on the US side, there was a strange State Department press release saying that we thought they had gone quite well, But I think, just like any relationship, if one side says it's not gone well, you better believe the side that says it's not gone well. In fact, I think on the American side, they said, we talked for 8 hours. Do you know how quickly 8 hours go? When you sit down, there are about a dozen on each side. You make introductions, they're translated. That's an hour and a half already, Then you take a coffee break. And and then you make opening statement, that's 2 hours. Then you go for lunch, you know? And then you respond to opening statement, that's it, you know? That's 8 hours, you know? There is no way any serious work can be done with translators in 8 hours, you know? So to say we talk for 8 hours, it's just saying we didn't talk, you know? So what is the way forward, you know, and really challenge for the working group negotiators like my successor? I think to me it's quite straightforward. You take a deal which failed, which was in Hanoi, and then you improve on it. You know? You improve both sides on it. So in Hanoi, the deal failed because North Korea would only offer what we call declared nuclear sites, which are called Yongbyon. I won't test you, don't worry. You know, which are called Yongbyon. These are declared sites, and they said we're willing to give all to you. Okay, but problem is we know there are other sites that are undeclared. You know? We don't know how many. We know for sure there is at least one, maybe more. You know, and so that's one problem with just giving up Yongbyon. Second problem is really, even though Yongbyon is significant, so if you ask nuclear scientists, well, they offered us Yongbyon, they would say, take it. Really is worth taking it. But again, at what price, right? And the second problem about Yongbyon, just doing the declared side, is that they had agreed twice before to give it. You know, once in 1994 when we reached the landmark agreement called Geneva Framework, and that was going to be the big deal to resolve everything in the Clinton era. The second deal was in 2005 when we again, agreed to swap Yongbyon for many things, and that was called Six-Party Talks Agreement. So this is what Washington means when they say they will cheat, when they say we're buying the same horse for the third time, and so politically it goes down very, very bad. And in return for Yongbyon, they wanted lifting of all sanctions that had been put in since 2016. And so I think they were convinced that because they valued Yongbyon, that they could get sanctions lifting out of it. And so in the end it failed because Trump was not willing to give that up yet. But there is obviously something to that. And so that should, I believe, be the basis of an agreement. And then there are other stuff. So in other words, for the US, you need a little bit more than Yongbyon. For North Korea, you need some sanctions lifting. And then you can add a couple of things which both sides really agree on. First one is, let's declare an end to war. Now, some of you are old enough, maybe not, to remember Korean War. Korean War ended in 1953, not through a peace agreement, but through a ceasefire agreement. It's called an armistice agreement. And that agreement is still in effect. There has been no peace agreement. And so you can say, so both sides saying, hey, Trump likes the idea of ending a war, even though there has been no war since 1953. So this is almost like a gimme, and so you can add that you should end the war, have a declaration on ending the war. And second thing you could add is, again, we try to do this in the 90s to open what we call diplomatic liaison office. Now, this is typically the phase we go into before having a formal, full diplomatic relations. We did it with Vietnam, many of you will recall. We did it with China, and so this is a good step to open our diplomatic liaison office. So these deals are possible, and it's what I would call an interim deal, and it would, include a roadmap to get to denuclearization. It would also, so essentially you're dealing with recognition, legitimacy issues, as well as dealing with denuclearization issues. Now, does this mean they're going to be completely denuclearized? I don't think so. This is an interim agreement, and this is where I agree with John Bolton, which is that they are showing no signs of completely giving up their nuclear weapons. I mean, why would they? This is a starving country, backward, unsuccessful at everything they've done except getting a nuclear weapon. This is their pride. This is cause for celebration, and it'll be very hard to give it up. And ultimately, they do believe this guarantees them from no external attacks. And so it will be very hard, right now, unthinkable. Where I differ from John Bolton is that this does not mean we should go and take them out by force. Doing that would only welcome retaliation and an unthinkable nuclear war. I mean, it's just beyond our imagination, the damage that will cause. The price is simply too high. So what options are left? I do believe that diplomacy, step-by-step negotiation, will get us to steps for them to perhaps initially put a limit. It's a little bit like arms control agreement, to put a limit on their stockpile. Thereafter, you agree on reducing their stockpile, and in return, you're going to have to address their fundamental concerns over their security. You're going to have to exchange security guarantees. You're going to have to make sure that the Kim regime will not be externally attacked. You're going to have to lift sanctions. I believe this is a decade-long procedure. We're not going to get there. Certainly, even if Donald Trump is re-elected, over the next 5-6 years, we're not going to get there within one administration. Which is why a process that goes from one administration to another, I think is really necessary. You just don't want these things to change each time there is a new occupant in the White House. But that's a message that's very difficult to drum into our folks, and so, I end the talk not necessarily pessimistic, but I think we're going to have to be more patient. We're going to have to show more recognition and understanding of why North Korea is as it is. So anyway, thank you everyone for patiently listening. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, first of all, thank you for coming this evening. It's a really great pleasure to have you here. Really appreciate your insight. So here's my question. I'd like you to speak a little bit, if you can, to the personality of Kim Jong-un. What kind of man is he? And to that I mean, I want to try and understand a little bit about his capacity to make decisions. from my perspective, he's a sick, twisted, sadistic narcissist. Okay? I'll just be totally blunt about it. So any decision he makes to torture and kill his own people, no repercussions. But if he had the capacity to deliver with an intercontinental missile anywhere on the planet, would he think twice? Is he smart enough to know the implications of that kind of a decision?
I've never met Kim Jong-un, but I've talked to a lot of people now who have met him. And apparently he is very smart, and nobody should have any doubt he is in full control of his own country. You know, we used to think when he came on the scene, now about 9 years ago, 2011 or 2012, that, it was like 23, 24-year-old, How on earth is he going to control this regime? But he did. I mean, he used some brutal tactics. He killed his uncle, who had been his, essentially his mentor. Yeah, don't be too much of a mentor, by the way. And then he killed his brother, half-brother, in Malaysia. So there's no question he's completely ruthless. But he's not suicidal. And he is not going to attack anyone outside unless, especially US, South Korea, Japan, unless he feels that's his last resort. So, and that's why I do think his nuclear weapons are deterrents. According to guys I have met, apparently he's a fairly cool customer. And one CIA guy was telling me in the meetings, of course everyone can look cool from, belly upwards, just have to sit still. The way you really tell whether someone's nervous is if they shake their legs, and stop that, And apparently his legs were completely relaxed in his meeting with Donald Trump. So I think we are stuck with him for a long time to come. He has had a bit of a Western education. He studied in Switzerland, I think for about 3 or 4 years, going to a German Swiss school. And he loves basketball, of course, as we all know. But I do think as a 35-year-old, he wants to live for a long time. And he understands that he needs the support of his own people, which is why he's very interested in getting economic growth. So I think that's the hook. I mean, my own thinking is that, if they were to have foreign investment, more trade, more back and forth, there were sanctions lifted. I mean, if there is that much influence coming in, if it's like most countries, either you're going to survive in more open environment or you're going to collapse. If he survives, good luck. If it collapses, that's great too,
Thank you for joining us on the eve of the first major snowstorm. Hopefully you don't need to get anywhere quickly tomorrow via I-70. Enjoy the mountains while you can. Very good talk on this. I've been to a lot of these talks, and I would say yours is one of the best I've attended. A question, in your opinion, does he still aspire, or did he ever aspire, to reunite the Korean Peninsula? Or is he more concerned about preserving his own regime?
This is a tough question, on reunification of the Korean Peninsula. and because both the South Koreans and North Koreans have a view. I personally believe to imagine that Korean Peninsula can be reunited under a North Korean auspices or North Korean leadership. I believe that's completely out of the question. You know? As I said, South Korean income is 30 times that of North Korea. South Korea is, one of the classic democracies in Asia. It has very healthy civil society. It has very healthy NGO movement, education, great press. So even the most leftists of South Koreans will not accept Kim Jong-un as their leader. There's no legitimacy, you know. And I think Kim Jong-un knows that. And so I don't think his nuclear weapons are there to reunite Korea under his rule. But rather they're there because there's no way North Korea can compete with South Korea on any other level, you know. So I mean, then among South Koreans, the question of reunification is no longer, they don't talk about reunification, but rather about reconciliation. You know? Let's live with North Korea in peace. You know, let's not just be totally enemies. So I think that's a movement. I mean, if you look at South Korean demographics, you know, you have older people in their 60s and 70s who hate North Korea because what they've gone through. They don't want reunification under anything else but under regime collapse. And younger people, say those in their 30s and 20s, who don't care about reunification, you know? And they don't care if they reconcile with North Korea. Their wishes are North Korea will just go away, you know? And then you have big middle people in their 40s and 50s who are very much for reconciliation. They tend to be more progressive. So you have conservatives, older and among old population and young population, and you have progressive in the middle. Now, what do North Koreans think about reunification? I mean, to me, we all think that because they're so poor, life is so much better, yes, they want to live like South Koreans. Maybe some do, but I question that also. I mean, you know, because if it's reunified, it can only be on South Korean terms, then North Koreans will be second-class citizens. They will be second-class citizens for generations. You know, I mean, this is true in anywhere that has been division and civil war, whether it's in Germany, where East Germans are certainly second-class citizens, or maybe even post-Civil War in the United States. You know, how long does that resentment last? And so I do believe that even among North Koreans, you know, I doubt, you know, when a whole bunch of them will want reunification. You know? So anyway, that's a long answer to your question, which is a very uncertain reunification question.
I'm sure we all hope that your wisdom is being shared with people who have much more they can do about it than anyone here. My question is sort of embarrassingly basic, which is, how come this flop between the relative prosperity of North and South happened so apparently quickly in the last century?
Well, I think this is essentially classic, Cold War result. That as long as actually Cold War was continuing, North Koreans are very good at playing off China and Russia. So they were able to get many assistance from China and Russia, oil from Russia and oil from China on the what they call friendship prices, free. And so they really played off, and so they survived until late 80s. But then the sudden collapse of Soviet Union, end of Soviet Union, ended all the assistance. And so that's one reason. Second reason is that they spent a lot of money on nuclear program and on missile program. There's no question. They spent a lot of money doing that. But also ultimately, it's their economic system. Communist economic system, as we've seen, especially in Soviet bloc, is just not conducive to economic growth. And this is why I believe ultimately they got so far behind, while South Korea, Taiwan, even China changed its system, Singapore, all these countries were able to prosper through export-led growth. This is also why I do think if they change the system, they could grow very rapidly. We've seen that in China, obviously. We've seen in Vietnam, where even under socialist system, market-based reforms can really kickstart the economy. And they probably don't even need to go through the basic, kind of industrial experience, which is going from textiles, light industries, to heavy industries, to services and information. They have a pretty good information technology. They are among the best hackers in the world, and so they may be able to jump a couple of steps and do well. So anyways, I think the reason is because of their system, because of their weapons program.
Next question, sir.
I wonder if you could talk about how much influence China has over North Korea, and whether China would be in a position, if they wanted to force denuclearization of North Korea.
Well, that's China is their only ally, their only benefactor. Over 90% of North Korean trade is with China. Without China, they cannot survive. In the past, for example, just before the six-party talks, when China wanted them to start engaging talks, they turned off the oil pipeline for a few days, and that convinced North Korea to come to talks. So China can have a say, but there is a limit to how much China can go to, because they also don't want the collapse of North Korea. Because collapse means essentially South Koreans might very well move up. With it, Americans move up, and the peninsula becomes, outside Chinese control. China must have at least buffer zone in that area, the border between North Korea and China. During the Korean War, China did not intervene until MacArthur and the troops, US and South Korean troops, went out near the border. Only then did the Chinese intervene, and they intervened massively. And Mao Zedong's son died in the Korean War. And so China is going to ensure that piece of real estate, that's North Korea, is always under their own influence. And so that's why they can control them to some extent. But, it's like, what's that Blazing Saddle movie where Mel, Brooke said, if you come step further, I'll kill myself, yeah. It's that kind of thing, yeah.
Over here, thanks. Trump's love affair with Kim Jong-un aside, do you think there are people in the State Department today who share your vision for a way forward with North Korea?
Essentially, where you are on North Korea, I think depends on I don't want to say your political views, but generally, if you're conservative, you're going to say these are unreformable people, or leader Kim Jong-un Moscow. And also no belief in they will ultimately denuclearize. So it has always been American policy to denuclearize North Korea, get rid of the threat, then we'll give them everything. But that has not worked. They're saying, well, we don't trust you. And so we must go step by step. And for them, that's very important to going step by step. And so I think there are now more people believing step-by-step approach. But even then, as I mentioned, is how big a step on each side. And this is where what I call asymmetry in interest gets in. For North Korea, this is about everything dealing with the US. Nuclear weapons is about everything. There's nothing else besides it. For the US, this is a small piece. We still have Iran to worry. You have Cuba issues, China trade issues. So this is asymmetry in interest makes it very difficult to negotiate, and sustain that negotiation. I do believe what is needed now is not public negotiations, insulting each other, but very much secret negotiations where you talk for a long time, not 8 hours, but weeks at a time. As for example, we did when we negotiated the Iran deal, or when in the Obama administration we negotiated, getting the international diplomatic recognition back again with Cuba. So those took months, and so it's not going to be resolved just through summit meetings. There are so many details and asymmetry in interest. So I think sustained, very quiet negotiations are what is needed, and I hope that happens.
A couple other questions here, then I'll go to the far side
Okay.
and get to the center.
Okay.
I'm just wondering about your insights in terms of the people in North Korea, because what we see in whatever documentaries we're able to see, it looks as though they're completely controlled, they're spied on, no one can do anything, and yet I believe you said that they need the support of the people. So how does that work when you're suppressing them so much? And I know they have rallies, but how do they have any support among the people at all?
That's I do think the regime has more support than is commonly acknowledged, and there are many ways to view that. And one is that in Pyongyang, and I've been there, and you can see that people are fairly well off. Those are elites living there. So certainly there is elites, who are educated, who belong to government, who belong to business, their favorite business, and so they keep them pretty happy, And then at a lower level, they have begun to marketize quite a bit. By marketize, this is very similar to Deng Xiaoping's reforms in China were about 40 years ago. If you're a farmer, before you had to give everything or sell your product to the government distributor. Now you can keep 25%, just give 75%. So that's opened up a bit, and so that's also true if you're making shoes, shoe factory, and so on. And this is why economy has not deteriorated to the extent they were in the 90s. And then last, there is always a mystery behind how the Kim family, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un, now Kim Jong-un, has that status. And I mean, this is a huge amount of propaganda, obviously. And I think I was talking to, our table, Joe Show and others. The Christianity really did take root in North Korea more than anywhere else in Asia. And this is due to Presbyterian missionaries that went from the US, a lot from Midwest and Ohio. And so they have, you can almost view the ruling family, their relationship with others, their worship, almost like a Christian cult, And so they have developed this Christian cult. I mean, maybe Christians don't like it. In which there is a real cult element, almost religious fervor, and that is encouraged, And according to some people I know well, they said it is very reminiscent of Presbyterian missionaries, what they have taught them, how to view, Christ and Trinity and so on, So maybe there's something to that, but I leave that up to you. Okay. Yes, sir.
I was very moved a few years ago when the North Koreans sent their contingent to the Winter Olympics in South Korea. I cried watching the women's hockey team. It was just such an emotional upper. And then when they started allowing families to reunite occasionally, I'd like to see a lot more of that. Is that possible? Because I think that's going to be a wonderful thing for North and South. No matter if they stay separate, but they're one people, they speak the same language. Right. It's nice if they can get along better.
Yeah, family reunions have been going on. I mean, the real problem is that it's cut off when the relations are bad. So it's especially cut off by North Koreans, and they use it as almost like a revenue burner, and that's very sad. And so I believe now the relations are better between North and South Korea. Typically, relations are better with South Korea when you have a progressive government in South Korea. So they're trying to encourage them. But again, it's, for North, it's something they can turn on and off. And this, gets to the similar fundamental questions of how controlled is it? What is it that the government will allow North Korean people to do? There is no doubt this is the most repressive of any society I've been. I've been to communist countries in Laos, I've been to dictatorship places like in Myanmar. I mean, but it's completely different when you go to North Korea. The overwhelming sense of someone's watching you, overwhelming sense that people are all walking, just looking ahead, not paying attention to anyone else.
We're on the far side here, and we'll go to the center.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming. Appreciate hearing everything you've said. I have a question. You had made a statement earlier about, and I agree with you that it would be a good idea to end the war, formally end the war. and that there's been no acts of war since, was it 53 or 54? Again, I'm no expert. But it seems to be like that the USS Pueblo and the downing of the U.S. aircraft, killing 31 Navy airmen, those seem like acts of war to me, but I don't know the formal definition of it. But if it was my family in a car and a neighbor captured them, I would consider that an act of war.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. There have been skirmishes. I agree with you on the Pueblo, as well as the shooting down of military, as well as North Korean attacks on South Korea. I don't know whether you remember in 1969, they sent a commando, which reached the gates of Blue House to kill Korean president at the time, Park Chung-hee. And then only in 2007, where the North Koreans sank Korean frigate, Tanan, and that was a big issue. So I'm not saying that there has been no action, So I agree with you that there have been plenty of military actions, hostilities that have gone. Yes.
Question in the center.
My question is, how much power is there in familial relationships? I know it's stereotypical, but a dry cleaner and a laundry in Conifer, Mr. Kim, and he's told me about relatives in the north and in the south, and it's very painful for them.
I think it is. This is one of the saddest things that that Koreans face with divided families. And when I was in the government, we started an initiative which is Divided Families USA. Because there are plenty of Korean Americans like you, Mr. Kim, who has divided families, and they started an NGO with and getting all the names together. And for a long time, neither North or South Korea wanted to deal with these Korean American groups who had divided families. But through their persistence, now it's become an issue, and where to the extent that both sides, both Washington and Pyongyang, have agreed that one of the first humanitarian moves they will make is to try to get some family reunion together. So I'm hopeful. Let's face it, there aren't many left now. That before long, if situation improves, that we may be able to get something, do something together.
We have one last question over here.
Yes, Joe.
When I taught for a term at a university in Dalian, China, in the northeast, we were about a 3-hour drive from, I think this is Dandong, the border, to North Korea. And the people in the northeast of China were deathly afraid of the government collapsing in North Korea, because they said immediately 10 to 15 million Koreans would come across the border. Is that a realistic concern? And then my second question, you arranged for the negotiations for normalization in Myanmar. What do you think about President Aung and the Rohingya and the whole situation there now, after she won the Nobel Peace?
You only gave me one wine for North Korea. You didn't give me wine for Myanmar. Chinese are genuinely concerned about refugees coming over. Of course, they've had a lot of refugees already there. So, when I was in the government, I started a dialogue with China, because they would not really talk to us about North Korea very much. And the only way we could get them to talk is to talk about humanitarian, what happens in contingency. That is, what happens if North Korea collapses? What should US and China do? They did not want to talk about it. And finally they began talking, because we promised them we'll talk about humanitarian situation, what to do about refugees, among others. So the two issues they really agreed on we should talk about is the refugee issue, and second, how to secure nuclear weapons there, you know? We don't want to turn up at a site and see China also trying to do the same, you know? So we had a series of dialogues with China on that. Now, if in a contingency, would North Koreans go to China? Yeah, of course they will. There are only two choices: go to China or go to South Korea. Like I said, it's tiny sliver of Russia, you know, just a couple of inches. So they are very worried. Remember that border area has always supported large amounts of North Koreans. And in fact, there is a whole prefecture, Yanji Prefecture, which is, they call it Korean Autonomous Prefecture, you know, where Koreans have been living for centuries. And so there is traditional relationship. So I'm sure, and that relationship is ongoing. People go back and forth across the border quite a bit. So they are right to be worried, and I'm sure they will go there. On Myanmar. So it was, I think, 2012. I went to Myanmar, and I visited the Rakhine State. At that time, there was another huge, killing or bloodshed, and people were escaping, and refugee camps were getting fuller, mostly Rohingyas, but also with Rakhine Buddhists. And so I went there. Secretary Clinton asked me to go because that was considered, one of her signature, foreign policies, getting Myanmar or Burma back to full diplomatic recognition with us. Since then, the thing has gotten a lot worse, of course. When I went there were about 1 million Rohingyas in Rakhine State. Over the last few years, something like 600,000-700,000 have left. They've been driven out. So this Rohingya problem may have been resolved through essentially, driving out Rohingyas, and remaining ones are now far fewer in number than Rakhine Buddhists. This is, of course, really, really disappointing. There's no question but that Rohingyas are part of that Rakhine. They've been there for generations. It is complete nonsense for Burmese, or the Myanmar government to say they are Bangladesh immigrants. This is complete nonsense. And I think Aung San Suu Kyi has completely lost out any kind of credibility, respect, that she had. And while you can explain her situation, I don't think what she did was justified her. And I've met her a number of times. The last time I met her was in 2016, when I was doing North Korea work. I went to Myanmar because Myanmar is a huge market for North Korean weapons. They made very And so I appealed to her at that time mostly I was about North Korea to stop buying weapons from North Korea. And we did talk about Rohingya, and then, she put a full-throated defense of the regime that it was just impossible to move and blamed it on the military. But I think it goes against any kind of human rights principles she may have had. So she's just not what we thought she was. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.